Hello. If you clicked on this video, chances are you want to know the plot of the Witcher books. Maybe you're a gamer and you just don't feel like picking up 7 books to know the entire story. Or maybe you watched the Netflix show and were sorely disappointed because what was that? And you want to see what the entire hype is about. Or maybe you did read the books but feel like there was something missing in the translation and that it would be nice to know a bit more about the cultural context around the series because tak, mogę potwierdzić wam, że jestem z Polski. Either way, you made it to the right place. My name is Vera, and today I'll be going over the plot summary for The Last Wish, which is book 1 in the Witcher series. And yes, I'm going to keep repeating this, but The Last Wish, aka Ostatnie Życzenie, is the first book in the Witcher series. Mind you, I'm saying book because even though it does function kind of like a collection of short stories, an anthology if you will, it doesn't change the fact that this is a book. A novel and anthologies are just 2 different mediums to tell a story in a book. And the medium in which we tell this story doesn't change the chronology in which the author intended you to experience the story. Before we get into the narrative itself, I think it's important to understand the structure of this book because it is quite confusing for some people. Sapkowski utilizes this thing called a framed narrative, which essentially you can think of stories being at different levels. So we have the level at the top, which is our frame narrative. These are the voice of reason interludes in between every single short story. Because Sapkowski is inherently in this series and in this book interested in subverting fairy tales and telling a new modern fairy tale, we can assume that he did take inspiration from other texts. Sometimes it is quite obscured, but I think when it comes to the voice of reason, he could have taken inspiration from the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. I say this because Geoffrey Chaucer does a similar thing. The point of the Canterbury Tales is that we follow these different pilgrims on the way to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket. And on the way to the shrine, they stop at the Tabard Inn where they tell stories because the innkeeper said that whoever says the best stories will get to win a free meal. And so what happens is we get all these different stories, and in between each of them, we have that frame narrative of the people telling their different stories on the way to the shrine. And where Chaucer interweaves different levels of feudal society, providing commentary and satirizing every single level, Sapkowski modernizes this take and makes it much more introspective with centering Geralt, our main character. Also, these voice of reason interludes act as a primer, usually, for the short story that follows. And the reason I say mostly is because we open up the story, quite infamously, with Big G Geralt of Rivia getting laid. You could argue that this does set a tone for the series and the video games.
Except for the 2 of us in Ciri, Geralt has slept with every woman on this ship.
Don't worry, it's only a matter of time in your case.
But this is quite a controversial opening. We start off with a mysterious girl who smells of chamomile, entering Geralt's room, waking him up with the little flutters that her dress makes. This automatically introduces us to the fact that Geralt has superhuman senses, and that he has a thing for smells. They make love, and he describes it as drowning in a chamomile sea that suddenly becomes violent and breaks up his peace. The one thing that I do want to mention about the translation is that here she's described as a water nymph, which that's not exactly wrong, but in the Polish, she is described as looking like a rusałka. And a rusałka is, sure, it's like this water nymph from Poland, but it's much more specific because rusałki have existed in Slavic mythology and they're very, very prevalent. Some would argue that they are equivalent to the mermaid, but I do think that this is an early example of the translators taking out some of that individuality to the story that was there originally. And this takes us to our first short story, the eponymous The Witcher. Wiedźmin, or as it's been translated into the English, The Witcher. This is the short story that really started it all, and I truly think that this is the perfect introduction to not only Geralt, not only the political situation and the atmosphere of the world, but a perfect introduction to the concept of Witchers themselves, because I'd argue this is the only short story, the only real extended instance of us seeing Geralt on a real Witcher contract that doesn't devolve into something else. The story starts in Vizima, the capital of Temeria, as Geralt enters a karczma. This is translated as an inn, but karczmas are so much more than just an inn. I actually used an image of this from Jan Felix Piwarski, and all the artists and all the links from which I got the art will be listed in the description down below. As Geralt enters the karczma, the innkeeper is making what else but pickles. I got a comment back in the day being like, oh, The Witcher's not Polish, blah, blah, blah. Bro, the first short story literally starts with an innkeeper making pickles. Ogórki kiszone for life, am I right? Anyway, they soon want to kick him out of the tavern because he is a Rivian, and they say that Rivians are basically just thieves and bad people to have around. Things start getting quite intense, and Geralt deals with the malcontenters, at which point the guards burst in and say that they're arresting Geralt. To be honest, this kind of reminds me of the White Orchard scene at the beginning of Witcher 3. So I assume it was a bit of an inspiration for that.
They won't back down now. I can see that.
Before they can fully arrest him, though, Geralt uses the Axii sign to calm them down and convinces them to take him to the castellan of the town called Velerat. Although not impressed with Geralt's handling of what happened in the Karczma, Velerat decides to hear Geralt out because he seems like an honest chap. To this, Geralt pulls out a contract from King Foltest of Temeria that is offering 3,000 orens and a marriage to the princess. However, of course, Geralt is only interested in the money. Although Velerat gets a little bit caught up in the fact that Geralt is a witcher, Geralt quickly reorients Velerat and tells him to tell him of what's going on. What happened was King Foltest here had a beautiful sister called Ada, and brotherly love soon turned into a little bit more. Unfortunately, Princess Ada became pregnant.
Arnar.
This not only caused controversy within the Temerian court, it actually kind of messed with some international relations because King Foltest was actually supposed to marry King Vizimir of Redania, his daughter Dalka. When Princess Ada gave birth, not many people saw the baby because crazy things happened. One of the midwives actually went crazy and killed herself after seeing the child. Princess Ada herself died during the birth. King Foltest put them in the catacombs of the old palace in Vizima, in a shared sarcophagus. Quickly afterwards, weird things started to happen. People in the area around the old palace started reporting sightings of a striga, and lots of people started dying. And so Foltest called magicians far and wide, druids, people in the know, to come and help him solve this problem of his daughter. No one was able to. However, there was one wizard that said that there is a possibility of turning the striga back into a princess and breaking the curse. Now, mind you, just for context, this is all happening 14 years after the birth of the baby. This is also 6 years after all the talk was about the striga being potentially turned back into a princess. And at this point, Foltest already has a different castle in Vizima because this one is obviously haunted. Geralt says that in his professional opinion, it's probably impossible to break the curse. This all ends with Geralt and Velerat negotiating. He will pay Geralt 1,500 orens to kill the striga, and he will let him go for giving the stuff and commotion that he caused in the Karczma earlier. Skipping a little bit forward in time, Geralt goes to meet King Foltest. King Foltest is really handsome, under 40, and very charismatic. People pay attention to him. People really respect him, despite all the rumors and the incest stuff that happened. And this is something that carries through to the games, especially the opening of The Witcher 2, where we follow around King Foltest. You see how much he cares for the people. There is a scene where he talks to a random soldier on the battlements.
What do they call you, soldier? Wait. You served with me at Brenneran during our foray into the Pontar Valley. Norman Sadel. Still an arbalist?
Yes, sir. Fate has not been kind to me.
Ha! Norman Sador. For your years of faithful service to the crown, I appoint you Decurion of the Arbalists.
Foltest is a good king. Unfortunately, the Netflix show made him out to be an idiot and a king that I don't think anyone would follow, when the entire point is that he is a good king. He is a good person. When he asks Geralt about his previous work, Geralt refers to the Witcher Codex, more on that in another segment. And he also says that he will hire Geralt, but that he insists that Geralt does not kill the striga and does not harm the striga because he loves his daughter. He also confirms that the rumor about being able to marry the princess if she becomes human again is false. He is a little bit worried about hiring a witcher because witchers are known to be killers more so than magicians, and a lot of magicians have tried and failed. Also, another witcher did attempt this contract before and ended up fleeing with the money. After their talk, King Foltest leaves and Geralt sits down to talk with Velerad, Ostrit, and another guy called Sagalin, but he's not too relevant, so I didn't print his picture out, sorry. A very interesting image is found when Ostrit sits down in Foltest's chair. The gentlemen tell Geralt that among the many wise ones that visited, they agreed that the way that they could maybe break the curse is if they kept the Striga out of the sarcophagus in which she sleeps for an entire night until the third cock-a-doodle-doo of the rooster. I don't know, the third rooster shouts. I'm not sure, I should have probably searched how to say that up. Geralt is also very observant, and he asks if she only attacks during the full moon, / if there were any attacks during the day. He asks if anyone survived. This leads him to know that someone did, and it was a miller. Now, before I move on, something that you might not notice unless you're Polish is the similarity between this story and these two Polish works. One of them is this fairy tale by Roman Zmorski called Striga. And the Striga in that story has definitely similar features with the Striga in The Witcher. However, the Striga was more so the Polish, or rather Slavic, counterpart to a vampire, originally at least. And even though the Striga does eat people, it's not so much about drinking their blood. So there are differences. And so this story is a retelling of a Polish fairy tale specifically, but it also takes inspiration and directly references a very famous Polish legend, one of the most famous Polish legends, in fact, about the Wawel dragon in Krakow. Basically, the story goes that there was a dragon infesting the caves under the Wawel castle, and the king promised that whoever could defeat the dragon would win the hand of his daughter in marriage. And all the knights in the realm came, and they were not able to defeat this dragon. And so then a shoemaker came, and the shoemaker said that, well, the dragon likes to eat sheep. I will make a fake sheep. I will fill it up with sulfur, and when the dragon eats it, it will explode. And that's exactly what happens. The shoemaker is able to defeat the dragon with his fake sheep. And while we're getting all this information about past strategies of killing the Striga, one of the stories involves a stupid shoemaker who tried to give a fake sheep filled with sulfur to the Striga to eat. Moving on, Geralt meets with the miller. He finds that it's kind of useless when it comes to the interrogation. However, he does look at the miller's scars and is able to extrapolate some things about the Striga's features from that, which does really translate well into the game because we examine wounds quite a few times throughout playtime. When the miller is dismissed, the soldier that brought him in actually turns out to be no one else but Foltest in disguise. Again, Foltest is very intelligent and he really, really cares, especially in this interaction, saying that he knows that Velerad, Ostra, and Sigalin just want Geralt to kill the Striga and not try and save her at all. And he's there to beg him to try and save his daughter. Geralt says that he might save her, but perhaps the method that the wise ones told Foltest won't work. Maybe it's not that it's one night. Maybe it's not 3 calls of the rooster, but 5. Maybe he will make her into a human again just for her body to not be able to handle the transformation and die anyway. And what if she attacks Geralt? To which Foltest reassures Geralt that he will not kill him if he kills the Striga in self-defense. Foltest really astounds me, and he says that the king would have to exile Geralt and publicly shun him, but Foltest, the father, would let him go and help him get away. That all being said, Geralt still maintains that even if he manages to change the Striga back into a princess, perhaps this could come back, because these sorts of curses can reoccur. After all this talk, Foltest suddenly goes silent, and then he says Geralt's name, for the first time referring to Geralt by his name. And he asks Geralt, is all of this because she's a daughter of incest? It's very obvious that Foltest feels very guilty for all of this, and Geralt reassures him that it's a possibility, but her being born out of incest itself would not have caused the transformation, because a curse must be made with an intention. Foltest then says that he will go into the crypt with Geralt and help with the fight, but Geralt tells him that that's the stupidest thing that he could do, and that Temeria still needs a king, and that him sacrificing himself for nothing would do absolutely nothing. The conversation ends with Foltest saying that he'll probably never know if Geralt goes into the fight intending to kill his daughter or save her. Either way, he wants Geralt to go in because he is scared that his daughter is suffering. Now we get to the climactic sequence where Geralt finally goes to the Vizima Old Palace. And this is the scene that's the intro to The Witcher 1. And I really think that the way they adapted it, it's basically sentence for sentence, every single description, it's exactly how it's described in the book. So to be honest, I think CD Projekt really outdid themselves. But as Geralt is preparing his potions, his swords with the runes, he starts meditating for any movement with his enhanced senses. It's important to note that his face becomes like chalk, and his irises in this case do become black, but it's because he makes the cat potion. It lets him see in the dark, right? So his pupil has to dilate. It's not specified whether this happens for all potions or just this one. However, instead of hearing a Striga, he hears someone else. He goes out and he finds Ostrit standing there and offering him 1,000 orens to just leave, not killing the Striga, not doing anything, just abandoning the mission. Geralt says that he believes in workplace ethics and therefore he will not leave a job half finished, but he is also suspecting that Ostrit is connected to the King Vesemir of Redania, who is quite upset once again that Foltest didn't marry his daughter. Ostrit tries to attack Geralt with a turtle stone because there is a superstition that turtle stones will neutralize witchers. However, this just shows that Ostrit is kind of dumb because Geralt takes care of him, ties him up, and then uses him as bait. Right before that, though, we find out that Ostrit was actually in love with Ada and that he was the one that accidentally cursed their daughter into becoming a Striga. Right when Ostrit is finished telling Geralt that, Geralt hears the stone in the sarcophagus move and he lets Ostrit go. The Striga chases Ostrit down and eats him. Geralt once again shows that he's really an expert monster hunter because the reason he is using Ostrit as bait, even though the Striga has been eating recently, is because he knows that Ostrit's heart and lungs and liver will be important for the Striga's hibernation. Notably, when fighting the Striga, he uses Ard. It's the same as in The Witcher 3, except he is able to hold that telekinetic push. They make their way down into the catacombs of the palace. And something that is very interesting is that Geralt's fighting style is really described as a dance macabre, like a macabre ballet. It is quite memed upon, especially in Blood of Elves, but Geralt is a huge fan of pirouetting in his fight sequences. Anyway, they fight, it's very intense, but it ends with Geralt being able to get the Striga out of the sarcophagus, and he climbs in and lays down beside Ada's dead and rotting body. He also locks the lid using the Yrden sign and takes a potion that knocks him out. In the morning when he awakes, it's actually been a little bit longer than he intended. He had a sand time turner sort of thing that helped him keep track of time, and the sand has all went through, so he knows that he's been sleeping a bit longer than intended. And something that I really appreciate is how the books keep reinforcing to us that Geralt is truly just a guy. Like, yeah, he's a witcher, he's been through like all these mutations and he's stronger, but at the end of the day, he's not invincible. And as he lays there in the crypt, it is described that he feels cold and weak, and that the fight really did take a lot out of him. And I feel like this really adds to the realism and the grittiness of the vibe of the story, the atmosphere, if you will. Now, when Geralt exits the sarcophagus, instead of finding a Striga, he finds a princess. And despite the image that I have chosen, this princess just looks like a normal red-headed 14-year-old girl. And she has all the markings and bruises in the places in which Geralt hit the Striga the night before. He comes close and checks if her fingernails are normal, if her teeth are normal, but as he bends over, she wakes up and immediately goes for his neck and bites. He does something very curious. He ends up biting her neck in return. Now, there's many different interpretations of why he does this, and so if you have any idea, do let me know. Maybe it could be something about something animalistic being in all of us. I'm not too sure. But this causes the princess to stop attacking and she just cries silently. Anyway, they end up leaving the crypt just as the rooster does that little cock-a-doodle-doo. The short story ends with Geralt waking up with Velerad standing over him. The first thing that Geralt asks for, of course, are his blades, and nothing was lost, and he has his 3,000 orens. He also finds out that he's been passed out for 2 days. The princess is fine, but has the mind of a 3-year-old, not a 14-year-old, and pees the bed. And as Geralt falls back asleep because of his awful neck wound, Velerad Velerad asks him, why did he bite the princess? That was all for the eponymous Witcher story, where we find out why Geralt in the frame narrative is in the Temple of Melitele. He is being healed for this neck wound that the Striga caused him. So, with that being said, let's jump over back to the story of Geralt being healed. Back to the voice of reason. This interlude begins with Geralt waking up and shielding his eyes from the sun. And now, why am I bringing this up? When Netflix released their posters for The Witcher, there was a lot of controversy surrounding the fact that Henry Cavill's contacts didn't have the cat eye split. They just had a normal pupil, like a human pupil. Something that I found interesting is that in the book, Geralt actually can do both. He has control over when he constricts the pupil and when he doesn't. And the reason why he still shields his eye from the sun is because he's not fully used to being able to just constrict his pupil. Perhaps this is foreshadowing that Geralt still has a human heart, despite the world telling him that he is an emotionless mutant. But who is he woken up by, you may ask? Well, he is woken up by the priestess called Mother Neneka, who I have over here. Mother Neneka quickly tells Iola, the girl that came to Geralt in the night, to leave, and as Iola is leaving, something very interesting about Geralt's character is revealed. She had changed. There was nothing of the Rusauka in her anymore, nothing of the luminous, chamomile-scented apparition she had been at dawn. Her eyes were blue, not black, and she had freckles on her nose, her neckline, and her shoulders. They weren't unattractive, they suited her complexion and reddish hair. But he hadn't seen them at dawn, when she had been his dream. With shame, he realized he felt resentment towards her. Resentment that she hadn't remained a dream, and that he would never forgive himself for it. Wrapped in her mantle, the girl pattered toward the door. Her bare feet slapped the floor, troubled, flushed, awkward, no longer reminding him in any way of Yennefer. But we'll get to that later. We find out that Geralt really wants to get out of the temple because they're in the Temple of Melitele. Mother Neneka, however, tells Geralt to chill because he just fought a Striga that took a huge chunk out of his neck. And Geralt, obviously a Witcher, he needs to somehow provide for himself. He is worried for how he's going to make money to eat. But Mother Neneka tells him that as long as he's in the temple, he will be taken care of and that he's free to roam around. At this point, we do get some world building about Melitele, who is the goddess of love, marriage, the harvest, etc. And we are also introduced to Geralt's friend Dandelion, but only through a second-hand perspective of Geralt telling us his thoughts about religion. Dandelion's take on the goddess Melitele is quite cynical, but it's also played for laughs, at least in the Polish version. He says that women have been giving birth for years, and they will keep giving birth for many more years. And as they give birth, women usually scream because obviously it's very painful. And so they kind of need some person's name to scream out loud, right? And who better than a goddess of love and praying to the goddess of love and fertility, Melitele. Now, at this point, I want to touch upon 3 translation issues that I think are quite prevalent throughout the entire book. The first one is that humor is very sarcastic, but when translated, the punchlines don't really always land. But when the sarcastic tone is removed, what we are left with is a very cynical, rude, or sometimes even misogynist tone, which just isn't really present there in the original text because it's subverted by the humorous aspect. And I feel like this passage, when we learn about Dandelion's views on the Melitele religion, that can come across as misogynist in the translation, but it really comes more of Dandelion is being Dandelion in the book originally. Another translation issue just throughout the book is the fact that Polish people, we have a lot of words that mean very similar things with slight differences often to the vibe. For example, synonyms for someone being good include serdeczny and szlachetny, but both of those words have different meanings. Serdeczny comes from the word serce, and so it conjures this image of someone being more so loving, whereas szlachetny gives us the image of perhaps like chivalry, and so someone being good more so in that sense. We also give specific words to things that aren't just as popular in the English language. For example, we love our mushrooms. Mushroom picking is a massive pastime, especially in the fall in Poland. And so we differentiate like all our mushrooms and we talk about them quite specifically. For example, kurki, which are my favorite, podgrzybki, pieczarki. In English, I do believe there are words for those derived from the French. However, usually the everyday person would just say, oh yeah, that's a mushroom. Whereas in Poland, because they're such a big part of life, everyone would differentiate. For vegetable, we have the word jeżyna, włoszczyzna, warzywo, which all of those basically mean the same thing, but for example, with jarzyny, those are more so spring vegetables. Włoszczyzna, I usually associate with vegetables for soup, and warzywa would just be the stereotypical vegetable. And this idea of words having different essences, I think, is seen in the saying grunt jest w tym, because it means grunt jest in something, and this refers to the point of something being. However, grunt in itself is a very earthy word. We are talking about the core fundamentals, like at the ground level of something, without all the overcomplication. And that's why things can seem quite repetitive in the English and like they're void of personality, because the personality just can't really translate. Thirdly, there are just some things grammatically that don't translate very well from Polish to English, and Sapkowski is a comedian. Like, the biggest thing that stands out to me about these books, just text-wise alone in Polish, is the humor. And Sapkowski is a master of language. He plays around with it a lot. An example of this that I can think of for English speakers is if an English speaker would ask someone about their glasses, they'd say, "What is your prescription?" In Polish, we say, "Jaką masz wadę?" which means, "What is your defect?" Now, obviously, if someone came to you in English and said, "Oh, you have glasses? What's your defect?" that would not really go over very well. And so I'm not really saying that that's one-to-one what's in The Witcher, but it is an example of something's just not translating well into another language. Anyway, back to the story. Nenneke at some point finds Geralt again and talks to him about putting him under a hypnosis. Geralt responds that he can't be hypnotized because he's immune, because he doesn't believe in Melitele. Nenneke, however, insists that she thinks there could be forces around him, but Geralt insists that he does not think that the trance would work on him because he is a non-believer. To which Mother Nenneke responds, "It would be the first evidence known to me that unfaith has any sort of power." This is another line that I don't think translates very well into English, because unfaith in English is translated to lack of faith, but niewiara in Polish is like a singular idea in and of itself. And perhaps it's because of Poland's history with religion, but it's just another thing that's kind of lost in translation. The purpose of this interlude is to foreshadow the power of religion that play a big reveal in the next short story. The second short story is Ziarno Prawdy, translated to A Grain of Truth. And it starts off with our boy Geralt riding his trusty steed, Roach. Something about our dear darling Roach that we have to realize is that she is called Roach not because of cockroaches, but because of Roach the fish. Because in Polish her name is Płotka, not Karaluch, which would have been the case if she was named after a cockroach. Anyway, they start off by watching birds, and Geralt realizes that perhaps there's like a moose or some dead animal that these birds are trying to get at. And so he goes, but instead of finding a moose, he finds 2 dead bodies. So he starts to investigate them. And actually, this segment is once again super, super reminiscent of The Witcher 3 and how when you find a dead body, you investigate it. And I really think that the game developers really excelled at picking out these different passages, things that make The Witcher special, and gamifying. Anyway, as he inspects the bodies, he notices a bite mark, but he doesn't think that it looks like a wolf's mite. And as he inspects the female body, because there's a man and a woman, he gets nicked by a navy rose that is pinned to the girl's dress. In the end, he decides that it's probably not that deep, and he continues on the trek because he needs money. Because our boy Geralt, unlike my Geralt in the video game, is always broke. Not too long after they ride out, they notice a manor in the middle of nowhere. As soon as they get closer, Roach goes kind of ballistic and starts whinnying. So Geralt uses the Axie sign to calm her down, once again something that is used in the video game as a mechanic. And they walk around the wall to reach the front gate. As they enter the courtyard, Geralt notices a woman out in the foliage. He doesn't really know who she is, and when he tries to approach her and say hello, she disappears into the foliage behind her. As they progress, Roach just keeps going crazy. The house itself in the Polish is described as a pałacyk, which means like little palace, but it's essentially this big manor house with a dolphin outside and navy roses blooming everywhere in the courtyard. And by now you're probably getting that this short story is a play on the classic fairy tale known as Beauty and the Beast. And this is why I say The Witcher, honestly, no matter what type of reader you are, you're going to find something I'm looking at you, ACOTAR girlies. Make this blow up, okay? In fact, Geralt is so mesmerized by these indigo roses that he walks up to them and he smells them. And just as he does that, the house goes crazy. The shutters start flying open and he hears a roar. And suddenly, he gets charged by an anthropomorphized bear. Mind you, also wearing human clothes. The creature charges Geralt, but right when Geralt pulls out his sword, the creature stops. The bear man does a very super villainy type speech and is like, "Goodbye, mortal, you must leave, blah, blah, blah." But Geralt sees through the BS and is like, bro, what the heck is going on? This catches the bear man off guard, and he says that where he comes from, when guests arrive at the house, they usually don't do so with a steel sword in hand. And Geralt actually says that it is custom to do that, but only for hosts who greet their guests by charging them and growling at them, which, I mean, fair enough. At this point, an awkward silence descends as Geralt and the creature just look at each other, at which point Geralt says, "What now? We're just gonna stand here?" And the creature responds, "Well, what do you propose? That we lay down?" It's all a really funny exchange. The situational humor is brilliant. Anyway, they put away their weapons, and another fantastic line showing Geralt's amazing charisma and ability to flirt with literally everything. The creature says, "Are you really not afraid of me?" And Geralt pulls out the classic line, "Should I be?" I swear, the romantasy girlies would be eating this up. Anyway, we find out that the creature is called Nivellen and that the house basically does his bidding. Geralt asks Nivellen if he lives alone. Nivellen gets a bit defensive, but ultimately invites Geralt in to see the house. Turns out the house was actually passed down to Nivellen from his grandfather and father before him, who were big merchants in the area and kind of got their house by using brutal measures and sabotaging other farmers in the area. Anyway, the house itself wasn't always magical. It only became magical when Nivellen was transformed into a monster 12 years ago. He shows Geralt pictures on the wall of his family members, including a portrait of himself. However, when he says this, they're sitting quite far from the portraits, and the portraits are quite dimly lit. And so when Geralt responds that he does see Nivellen's old portrait, also a reference to Beauty and the Beast actually, Nivellen is quite shocked and can tell that Geralt himself is superhuman as well. When Nivellen asks Geralt that if he's a witcher and witchers, kill monsters, why is he treating Nivellen like so well? Geralt responds that if Nivellen really was a monster, he wouldn't be able to touch his medallion, which, by the way, only vibrated when he was entering the house and hasn't vibrated since his chat with Nivellen started. And much more than that, Nivellen wouldn't have been able to handle his swords when he takes them. As they continue eating, the conversation turns to how Nivellen was turned into this bear man monster. Geralt says that it's probably a curse and that if Nivellen wants, he could probably try to undo the curse, but Nivellen quickly tells him that that's not what he wants at all. But he still is willing to share with Geralt the story of how he became a monster. Basically, since Nivellen was really rich because of the dirty work that his grandfather and father did in the area, he had a group of friends that were probably more so friends with him, not for his personality or virtues or anything, but more so for his money. And they kept trying to egg each other on. And they went on raids and all sorts of things. But one time, they went on a raid that ended differently for them. They decided to ransack a temple in Gelibal under MART. It was full of green fire and skulls. We'll get to that in a sec. But players of The Witcher 1 could be familiar with the symmetry. They killed everyone in there except for a single priestess, and Nivellen's gang held down the priestess and told Nivellen to rape her. Nivellen does so, and as he raped her, the woman shouted out a curse at him and killed herself. A few days later, he woke up as a monster. He doesn't remember too much other than he was going crazy, and so was the house. Then his emotions started shifting and he became worried that perhaps people would come and try to kill him from the nearby villages. At least that was until one day he looked out at his aunt's blue roses and he noticed a man cutting them down, and he was very confused. And so, inspired by his childhood stories, Nivellen ran out into the courtyard and started shouting, "Give me your daughter or give me your life." To which the man responded that actually his daughter was 8 years old. So, needless to say, Nivellen felt kind of bad, and he apologized, gave the man loads of money for his cart, and sent him on his merry way. However, that was until 2 months later when another man showed up with an of-age daughter and a big cart. And just like that began the cycle of Nivellen taking in girls for a year, giving their fathers loads of money, and having a companion. And Nivellen tells the story of multiple girls, and we really get the sense that he really cares about these girls that he takes in. He treats them like princesses. He says that these girls come from villages where they are nothing. They're destined to get married off to whoever their parents decide to, just having babies and babies for their husbands, living in dirty clothes, eating stale food. But with Nivellen, they get gourmet dishes every day. Any dress that they desire, they can have. And when Geralt asks Nivellen if he ever forced himself on any of the girls, Nivellen is disgusted by that idea and says absolutely not. However, as time went on and he got more and more visitors, unfortunately, the cash did start dwindling. However, at this point, Geralt remembers seeing the girl outside and asks Nivellen one more time if he is living alone. To which Nivellen says that Geralt should stop treating him as an idiot because at this point Nivellen has figured out that Geralt did see the woman outside. However, Nivellen also won't talk more about it and sets Geralt on his merry way because he isn't able to let Geralt sleep in the house due to personal matters. Geralt asks one last time if Nivellen doesn't want the curse to be lifted, and Nivellen says no, reiterating that before the curse, he had nothing, but now the girls, want to spend time with him. He feels like he has more value post-curse than he had pre-curse. Geralt also says that even though he doubts he could lift the curse totally, he did recognize the symbols that Nivellen was describing as the Karamagtera, priesthood of the lion-headed demon spider, and that this cult is particularly nasty. And in The Witcher 1, Abigail turns out to be a witch of this order. As they go outside and Geralt gets Roach, a cat shows up, and this cat is so cute. It's actually Nivellen's pet cat, and in Polish her name is Żarłoczka, which means like little cute thing that eats a lot and is constantly hungry, and I just think that's so freaking cute for a little cat. But yeah, it's another word that just can't be translated, Żarłoczka. Geralt is surprised actually because cats usually hiss at Geralt, right? So he's like, oh, animals like you? Nivellen's like, oh yeah, animals love me. And even Roach doesn't whinny when she sees Nivellen. However, the appearance of Żarłoczka does make Nivellen slip up, with him saying that Verena also likes, to which Geralt says, cats? And Nivellen says, no, birds. Nivellen says that he loves Verena, and Geralt postulates that Verena is probably a Rusałka because Rusałkas are scared of people, and if you remember, Verena disappeared into the forest upon seeing Geralt. And Geralt tries to reassure Nivellen that Verena probably wouldn't leave him if Nivellen turned back into a human, but Nivellen won't hear anything of it. Nivellen is also not an idiot. He knows that something probably happened to the last visitors that came to him because they appeared 3 days ago. Just before he says his final goodbye, Geralt asks that maybe he could look for someone to help, but Nivellen says no, that it is his problem, his life, and his punishment. If it gets worse, he'll also get used to it, and if it gets really, really bad, then Geralt shouldn't look for anyone else to help, but to come back and finish the job the Witcher way. Anyway, Geralt leaves. Unfortunately, he doesn't make it back on the trail before sunset, so he starts meditating. He does hear screams in the darkness, but doesn't think too much of them. The next day, though, when he takes Roach to the water, Roach starts going crazy again and whinnying again. A fairy ring shows up nearby, and he kind of assumes that Roach was scared of the fairy ring. However, Roach's sudden whinnying makes Geralt think. Nivellen said, "Animals like me." The cat liked Nivellen. So why was Roach going crazy at the start when they entered the manor? Who did they see by the entrance of the manor? They saw Verena. Geralt apologizes to Roach for calling her a crazy lady and tells her she has a better head than he does and goes back to the manor. When they arrive at the manor, the gate is closed, unlike before when it was open. Geralt exchanges his steel sword for his silver one and rides in. But he abruptly stops when he sees Verena on the dolphin in the middle of the courtyard. He tells her that she almost fooled him because she really resembles a Rusałka, but he realizes that she is actually a vampire, and he starts questioning her what type. And since when he finds her, she is singing and is very happy, he assumes that she must have recently drank blood. She considers herself the lady of the castle, wanting to live out her love story of the vampire and the monster, hypnotizing Nivellen to attack nearby villages in this trance-like state. She wasn't satisfied with him being a monster only in appearance. She wanted him to become fully a monster, also at heart. And we have it confirmed that she is a Bruxa. After this exchange, they start fighting. And interestingly, in this fight, Geralt uses a sign that isn't in the games. I mean, technically it is kind of, but it is called Quen. You know how in the games, they can have like this force field around themselves, the Witchers, like for example, in the Battle of Kaer Morhen. In the books, that is actually called the heliotrope sign. However, as things get quite rowdy between Geralt and Verena, suddenly Nivellen comes out to the courtyard as well, telling them to stop fighting. Also, one more interesting fact, in the books, Bruxa also have wings. As Nivellen runs out, we see that he was bleeding, and so Verena was actually eating his blood. As she jumps on Geralt, Nivellen calls her name, she turns around, and Nivellen impales her through her chest. Nivellen backs her into a wall, and as he does so, she starts pulling herself on the pole closer to him. It's truly a hellish image if you think about it. And as she's pulling herself closer and closer to him, Verena keeps saying that he'll either be hers or no one's, and that she loves him. When she finally reaches Nivellen, she grabs his head, opens her mouth, and her teeth flash out. At this point, Geralt jumps up and screams, trying to silence out the word that Verena keeps repeating. And the word is Koham, Koham, Koham. She's screaming to Nivellen that she loves him because Koham means I love you in this case. And once again, in translation, it doesn't really work, right? Because Geralt is screaming to ignore the fact that Verena is shouting to Nivellen that she loves him as Geralt is jumping at her, ready to kill her. And her screams are so loud that when Geralt actually chops her down, he wasn't able to ignore her shouts of love. After all of this happens, Geralt turns to the side and finds Nivellen in his human form. Nivellen is really dazed and in shock, and he asks after Verena, but Geralt just tells him not to look at the remains and takes him by the hand as they walk away from the blue roses. Nivellen, kind of traumatized by everything that just happened, asks Geralt how it's possible that he turned back into a human being. And Geralt says one thing: in every fairy tale there is a grain of truth. Love and blood both have a mighty power. Magi and scholars have been breaking their heads over this for years and haven't concluded anything other than that love must be true. And so that's the very tragic ending to A Grain of Truth by Andrzej Sapkowski. We have a crazy showdown between Verena, Geralt, and Nivellen. The question that we are left with is, who was the monster in this case? Was it Nivellen, who was cursed rightfully by doing the terrible deed to the priestess? Was it Verena, who wanted to turn Nivellen into a real monster? Or was it Geralt who destroyed this love, which it was a true love, as proven by the curse being broken? This is a fan favorite story, and I think rightfully so. It is so incredibly atmospheric and so dark and brutal and so powerful, so powerful. As well as the image of Verena on the dolphin is something that really has stuck with me throughout all these rereads. Incredible, incredible sequence. Anyway, back to the hyperdiegetic level. We are introduced to Falvik of Moen and Tales of Dorndal as they come to the Temple of Melitele to basically say that they want Geralt to leave. They are from the Order of the White Rose, which you might recognize from The Witcher 1 and The Witcher 3 Hearts of Stone expansions as the Order of the Flaming Rose, but on that in probably another video if I continue the series. We find out that they've been sent to the temple by Duke Hereward over here. Mother Nanika says that she doesn't recognize Hereward as a duke because back in the day, dukes had to have royal bloodlines and he does not. To that, Tails really takes a lot of offense and he starts really ripping into Mother Nanika, and she's not about that. And by the way, this is why I always punch him in the opening of The Witcher 2.
Holy man unharmed and the noble gets slapped. A win-win situation if ever I've seen one.
When he starts getting quite aggressive, Mother Nanika insinuates that he'll get cursed if he breaks something, which makes him back off. And she calls him a zasrany smarkacz, which means like a baby that pooped himself. And she says that she feels bad for his mother and the pain she endured while giving birth to him, and that she would know because she was his midwife. Which, to be honest, is an insane burn. I love Mother Nanika. At this point, Geralt steps in and he basically starts telling them to back off, especially Tiles, because he's getting like really annoying. He basically tells them that he's pretty sure that it's the Order of the White Rose that wants him gone and not Duke Herivard himself. Things keep escalating with Tails and Falvik telling Geralt that he's not wanted here and that he's in Elander and therefore he should listen to them. But then Mother Nenneca says that actually they're in the Temple of Melitele, which is a holy site, so they should just shut up and leave. She even insinuates that Tails bought his way into the knighthood and didn't earn it because recently a lot of people have been buying their way into the Order of the White Rose. This interlude ends with Mother Nenneca telling them that she will write a personal letter to the Duke and escorting them out of the temple. The way this leads into the next short story, though, is because Falvik and Tails kept saying that they do not want the Butcher of Blaviken to be in Elander because wherever he goes, he brings trouble. And of course, the next short story is where we learn how Geralt got his moniker of being the Butcher of Blaviken. Now we get to the third short story, called The Lesser Evil. Perhaps the most famous one and the most often quoted one. In fact, the central philosophy of Geralt is fully explored over here. Like, this story is truly, truly foundational to understanding his character. And I understand why Netflix decided to start off their series with this episode. However, I still feel like the way Andrzej Sapkowski introduced us to this world is more effective, because in the first short story, he introduces us to Witchers as a concept. In the next two short stories, he introduces us to Geralt as a character. I think that in A Grain of Truth, we get to know his heart, whereas in The Lesser Evil, we get to know his mind. The story starts off with Geralt and Roach riding into Blaviken carrying a Kikimora. And as they ride into Blaviken, you know, cats are hissing at him, children are afraid of him, people hate him because he is a mutant, a witcher, disgusting. However, he is quickly recognized by the village leader known as Caldamain. Caldamain takes Geralt under his wing, but also tells Geralt that things are quite busy and that things are quite exciting in Blaviken at the moment because there will be a market day soon enough. And in Polish, the word that they use for market day is actually jarmark. And yes, it is a market day, but if you haven't been to a Polish jarmark, you are missing out so much, especially in the countryside, in the skanseny, which are these like recreations of what like old Poland used to look like. They have jarmarki for celebrations like Święto Chleba, which is the celebration of the bread, and that's one that I absolutely adore. It's just honestly everything. You get pierogi, you get zupki, you get grzybki. Oh my gosh, it's honestly delicious, like amazing, amazing, amazing. So the village is rightfully excited. However, he also tells Geralt that he can't pay him for the Kikimora because there was no contract. To be honest, no one really expected a Kikimora to be found in the surrounding areas, but that's fine. Caldamain says, however, that they do have a village wizard now called Master Irion. And he says that even though he can't pay him, perhaps Master Irion would be interested in looking at the Kikimora. And so Geralt and Roach make their way to the wizard hiding in the tower. However, when they get to the tower, the Master Irion really doesn't want to see them. He tries turning them away until he realizes that he recognizes Geralt. And he asks Geralt, "Is it really you?" And Geralt says, "Yes, it's me." And Master Irion says that he will see Geralt, but only Geralt. And when the doors open, it's no one else but the wizard Stregobor, who Geralt knows from a previous contract. The description of Stregobor always makes me laugh because he is described as the stereotypical wizard with the cape and the beard and the wand and everything. I think it's very funny that such a outlandish description of, you know, what we would consider the stereotypical wizard is found within the Witcher series. And also it brings to us this image of this isn't what usual wizards look like. In other news, Stregobor made the tower into this mirage of a paradise. There are naked girls running around the fake apple tree plantation and passing apples to Geralt as he walks by. There's a little hut in the center where Stregobor resides as well, so it's a very idyllic mirage. Stregobor reveals that he is being chased by a monster. He says, "Destiny has many faces. Mine is beautiful on the outside and hideous on the inside. She has stretched her bloody talons towards me." And I think that's an amazing line. Geralt, however, is not exactly too excited to jump to Stregobor's help. He responds, Stregobor. That's the way of the world. One sees all sorts of things when one travels. 2 peasants kill each other over a field, which the following day will be trampled by 2 counts with their retinues trying to kill each other off. Men hang from trees at the roadside. Brigands slash merchants' throats. At every step in town, you trip over corpses in the gutters. In palaces, they stab each other with daggers, and somebody falls under the table at a banquet every minute from poisoning. I'm used to it. So why should a death threat impress me? And what's more, one directed at you at that. Stregobor obviously gets offended that this is Geralt's response. However, Geralt then reveals to us how exactly he knows Stregobor and what the mission was in Kovir and Povis. Turns out, they didn't end on too good terms. Shocker, right? Basically, after Geralt fulfilled the contract, Stregobor called Geralt a charlatan and had him exiled from Kovir, such that Geralt had to flee before the time ran out, or else he would be hunted and killed. So yeah, Stregobor is not the best chap, actually. And Geralt was once again broke. However, trying to persuade Geralt that this is really serious, Stregobor mentions this thing that looms over the rest of the short story, and it's called the Curse of the Black Sun. Initially, it was known as the Madness of Eltibald, who basically said that the evil goddess Lilith would return and cause humanity's destruction through the bodies of girls born under an eclipse, aka Curse of the Black Sun. Although Geralt initially dismisses this as just another wizardly mania, Stregobor says that he saw the bodies of the girls, the cadavers, and that they had all sorts of crazy mutations. Geralt quickly calls him out and realizes that Stregobor saw cadavers because he was experimenting on the girls. To which Stregobor does admit that they did run experiments, and he even admits that they vivisected one, all in the name of science. However, he does also say that it was a mistake. When they realized their mistake, they started to isolate the girls in towers because they were worried about their evil natures. This all is actually quite reminiscent as well of Rapunzel with, you know, the princess locked in the tower. Actually, you could make an argument that the Rapunzel character here eventually becomes Stregobor because he too is now hiding in a tower. However, the main story that the lesser evil is subverting is the story of Snow White. And this brings me to, where was Stregobor working when all of this was going down? Well, he was working in Creighton, the country of King Fredefalk and Queen Aridea. However, before Fredefalk and Aridea were married, Fredefalk had a previous wife. Now, in the book itself, we never learned the previous wife's name, but in the video games, her name became Sylvain, and because of that, I'm going to use the video game name. Just remember that she isn't ever officially named in the books. Anyways, Sylvain had a daughter, and that daughter was Renfri. And Renfri had the misfortune of being born under the Black Sun eclipse. Now, Fredefalk's new wife, Aridea, had the Mirror of Nehelene. You will probably recognize that name from the Eye of Nehelene that we can use in the 3rd video game of The Witcher. But this mirror, it would answer any of Aridea's questions and show her things that were like oracular in nature. And what she saw in this Mirror of Nehelene was that Renfri was going to bring destruction to the lands. Of course, Sapkowski never misses a chance to make a joke about the original source material, and when Stregobor brings up Aridea's mirror, Geralt makes the joke of if she asked the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? However, Aridea had a problem. She has these visions that Renfri will be awful. Stregobor is working with Aridea, and they decide that they somehow need to get this girl gone. However, the problem is that King Fredefalk absolutely loves his daughter and won't allow anything to happen to her. So what do Stregobor and Aridea do? Well, they enlist a huntsman. To be fair to Stregobor, he did want to just isolate her. It was Aridea who really adamant about the huntsman, but it doesn't matter because they found the huntsman dead a few days later with his pants down and his brooch impaled through his ear into his brain. Renfri, however, her stuff was lost to them. After 4 years, Renfri was found in the end in Mahakam, where she made a name for herself as a bandit, with leading a group of 7 gnomes who she convinced that they would make more money working for her than in a mine. She also started to call herself Shrike at this point. At this point, Renfri was 17. Suddenly, Aridea and Fredefalk die mysteriously. And Renfri and the 7 gnomes have a mysterious argument. They don't know about what. Stregobor assumes that either they just didn't get paid or, you know, like all bandit groups, something just came up and things ended poorly. Around this time as well, Stregobor has a chance encounter with Renfri, where she attacks him and he fights back by turning her into a crystal and throwing her down a mine. However, a prince comes by, kisses her, and undoes the magic. Geralt remarks that this was a very easy spell to undo. However, Stregobor does agree, but he also says that he was under a lot of pressure. The prince that saves Renfri, though, didn't get off scot-free. Took her back to his castle, which in reality resembled a barn more than a castle, and she murdered his entire family. She somehow immunized herself to magic and decided to find Stregobor to exact revenge. Now, she is in Blaviken. Stregobor saw her with his crystal ball, and she is there with a new band of people. So essentially, Stregobor is now asking Geralt if he can kill Renfri for him. Geralt obviously responds that he won't be killing Renfri because he is a witcher and he only kills monsters. Stregobor keeps insisting that Renfri herself is a monster because she was born under the Black Sun and because of her mutations. However, Geralt says that Renfri has legitimate causes to hate Stregobor, who planned her death and experimented on her sisters. Stregobor laments, "Am I to sit here in this tower and wait for death?" To which Geralt responds, "They did." Bagner line. Nonetheless, Stregobor begs him again, to which Geralt reiterates that he won't, saying one of the most fire lines ever of all time, super quotable, and one of the most famous quotations from the Witcher series. "Evil is evil, Stregobor. Lesser, greater, middling. It's all the same. Proportions are negotiated, boundaries blurred. I am not a pious hermit. I haven't done only good in my life. But if I am to choose between one evil and another, then I prefer not to choose at all." Back at a tavern called the Golden Court, Geralt meets Caldemain, and Caldemain asks the innkeeper about the group of men and a woman that are there, they say, for Market Day, which is just around the corner. Geralt wants to confront them, but he doesn't want to do it in public, so he opts to do it alone. He enters a back room, but Renfri is not there. Something to notice is there's a lot of tension between Geralt and the men. They throw around a bunch of insults, and the one that particularly strikes Geralt is an insult about his mom. Remember, he doesn't really know his mom at all, and so this definitely struck a chord. Luckily, at this point, a hot new bombshell enters the villa, and it is Renfri. Another thing that is really lost in translation is the way that Renfri speaks. And this is very interesting because Renfri is, on one hand, a princess, but on another hand, she was never treated like a princess. She was either treated like a mutant or she was a bandit. And so even though she has the aura of a princess, she has the mouth of not a princess. And she keeps saying this swear in Polish, which is psia krew, and it roughly translates to dog's blood. And that seems very random, but she keeps saying it over and over and over. It's just like it's the Renfri thing to say. There's no corresponding swear in English, so unfortunately this is lost in translation, but I just think it's so perfect because psia krew is kind of like, I don't know, frick or shirt. You know, things children say when they don't want to swear, but they kind of want to swear, you know what I mean? And she keeps saying it, and it's also something that perhaps the lower class in Poland would have been saying a lot. It was actually my great-grandfather's favorite swear as well. He always said psia krew, like that's the most prominent memory that I have of him. Anyway, she admonishes the gang for causing the disturbance and tells them to not cause a commotion because for a little town like Blaviken, their market day, which is happening in like a day or so, is their biggest event and they wouldn't want to cause any trouble for that. She agrees to talk with Geralt and Caldemain. Caldemain tells her to please not do anything stupid, and Renfri says that they won't do anything stupid. They are allowed by a prince to be there of the area, and she also reveals her loyal lineage, kind of to also reassure Caldemain that they are not going to do anything bad. When Caldemain and Geralt start to leave, Renfri pulls Geralt back for one last bit of conversation. She asks Geralt if Stregobor is his friend, and Geralt says no. But that if anything should happen, he won't exactly be a thoughtless observer. To that, Renfri says Stregobor dies tomorrow. It would be the lesser evil if he died alone. And with this very ominous ending to the conversation, Geralt leaves, and later at night, in his attic room where he sleeps, he feels a low vibration in the medallion, which, by the way, very interesting detail, remember, because the medallion only vibrates around magic. So does this insinuate that Renfri is cursed? Like, that's one of the huge questions of this story. Is Stregobor justified with Renfri being actually evil, or is all of this made up and it's more of a nurture thing and not a nature thing? Essentially, Geralt in the attic room finds Renfri lying in wait. He calls her Shrike, her bandit name, but Renfri really doesn't like that for some reason. She says she came to Geralt to help prevent a butchering. Geralt points out that they are still at a standstill because Stregobor won't leave the tower and she can't get into the tower without breaking the law, in which case she wouldn't be protected by the prince from excommunication from the town. Renfri says that if Blaviken gets in between her and Stregobor, they will regret it because of her boys. And Geralt says that he will end up supporting Caldemain if anything should happen because Caldemain is Geralt's friend. Renfri says that Stregobor himself could prevent the bloodshed by just coming down and sacrificing himself, and Geralt said that that's not happening. Renfri, however, thinks it does and invokes the Tridam Ultimatum. She says it is her sweet surprise and she won't disclose what it means exactly. Geralt points out that she could also prevent the bloodshed by showing some of her royal mercy, but Renfri says that she stopped being a royal at the point when Eridea and Stregobor requested that the huntsman take her to the forest and kill her. Of course, turns out the huntsman did let her go, but not before trying to rape her. And she said that when she was being raped, that was the end of the princess. Later on, Eridea and Stregobor didn't let her go either. They even tried to send her a poison apple, and a gnome saved her by giving her an emetic that made her puke up with the poison. When questioned about this, Renfri gets very defensive over the gnomes. We actually never truly find out the truth behind her parting with the gnomes, which again calls into question her identity, which really messes with Geralt's head, to be honest. But what we do know is that when Geralt questions her about this a bit more, she gets very defensive, and we learn that there is a lot of racism towards non-human species, but that Renfri is protective of these gnomes because they treated her better than most humans ever did. Renfri then says that actually Geralt could also help prevent the bloodshed if he just went to Stregobor and killed him for Renfri. Renfri then asks if Stregobor asked Geralt to kill her. Geralt says that Stregobor said that he should kill her and that it would be the lesser evil, but Renfri has a very interesting response to this, and it's very much the second part to the previous quote that I read to you. Only evil and greater evil exist, and beyond them in the shadows lurks very big / true evil. True evil, Geralt, is something you can barely imagine, even if you believe nothing can still surprise you, and sometimes true evil seizes you by the throat, saying, "Choose, son. It's either me or that other, slightly lesser evil." Also, quick note on the translation. In the original text, the very big evil is personified and is given a voice, which is kind of how I translated it. However, in the translator's note, it's much more passive, saying, "And sometimes true evil seizes you by the throat and demands that you choose between it and another slightly lesser evil." Which, fair enough, but I think that the personification of evil was a good choice. Their conversation ends with unresolved tension. Renfri is steadfast in wanting revenge. She tells Geralt other stories of people taking advantage of her, but Geralt says that he will not kill Stregobor in Blaviken. To this, Renfri capitulates and says, "Okay, fine," and says that she will leave Blaviken in the morning. At this point, Geralt and Renfri boink. And mind you, I just want to make a point here, yeah? Sex here is used as a power thing. She is trying to establish dominance over him, or for him to feel some sort of like emotional debt to her, essentially. She is not having sex with him because, I'm so in love with Geralt. She's having sex with him to manipulate him, okay? And I feel like that is really, really missed in the translation. Not only that, but the flirtation is so good. And when you read the translation, it really reads as her just out of nowhere becoming really desperate for Geralt to sleep with her. And again, in the original, that's not it at all. She's very coy, saying like, "Oh, Geralt, I just couldn't bear the thought of you not being attracted to me," you know? And it's all very coy. It's all to get him hot and bothered, and for him to think with his dick and not with his head. And hopefully that would affect him then the next day with what happens on the market day. So again, something that's really lost in translation, a passage that reads as really misogynistic and kind of like wish fulfillment in the English version originally does not read like that. Anyway, that's just my little note on the translation. Also, a cute little detail that I love to mention is that as they're getting undressed, they do the whole thing like, look, there's no knife here, there's no knife here. That is a popular trope in some romantasy books. Anyway, the next day, market day, we meet Marilka, who is Caldamene's daughter. In the Netflix TV show, she actually brings Geralt to Caldamene, I believe, at the very start. Freya Allen was originally cast for that role, but then she became Ciri. Anyway, she's super excited for the market. Caldamene tells Geralt that he is kind of worried about this entire group because of what happened at Tridam, but also that he can't really do anything about it because they are protected by the prince of the area. To this, Geralt recognizes the name. Tridam, like the Tridam ultimatum. And so he asks what exactly happened in the Tridam catastrophe. Basically, a baron was holding people captive, so the gang started killing his subjects on boats because Tridam was like on the river, until the Baron had no choice but to let the other captives go. After this, Geralt realizes exactly what Renfrew wants to do. She wants to replicate the Tridam ultimatum during the market day by slaughtering as many people as she has to in market day to get Stregobor to come down to the market. But what she doesn't understand is that Stregobor will not leave the tower because ultimately he doesn't care about the people of Blaviken. Geralt does try to quickly explain this to Caldamene, but Caldamene just has no clue what's going on, and Geralt ultimately decides that it's better to not waste time. So Geralt runs to the market hoping to prevent carnage, and Caldamene is really disappointed and terrified of the consequences that this can bring to him. The battle starts with a gang preparing crossbows, just like they did in the TV show, even though it wasn't at a market. But that battle scene in the TV show is so good. And when Geralt arrives, it turns out Renfrew left a message for him. I am what I am. Choose, either me or that other lesser one. With that, the group attacks Geralt. Geralt knocks a bolt out of the air, king behavior. And ultimately, Renfrew does arrive at the scene and they duel. And Geralt tries to explain to her that Stregobor will not come down from the tower to defend the people from her. It just won't happen. She can't recreate the Tridam ultimatum with someone who doesn't care about Blaviken. Ultimately, Renfrew doesn't listen. They duel. They're very well matched. However, Geralt does end up overpowering her and killing her. As Renfrew dies, she reaches out for Geralt and tells her that she is cold and asks him to hold her one last time. However, as she collapses dead, a little dagger slips out of her arm. So once again, we are left not knowing the true nature of Renfrew. After all this has happened, the gang is slaughtered in the marketplace. Renfrew is lying dead on the ground. Stregobor arrives, and before saying anything, he says they should take Renfrew's body and perform an autopsy on it. Just like all the other mages before with all the other poor girls from the Curse of the Black Sun. Geralt obviously refuses and tells Stregobor to back away from Renfrew's body. Stregobor says that Geralt is being foolish and that the people won't even know what Geralt did for them. And sure enough, as the market day truly commences and all these people just think that they witnessed mindless slaughter, people start stoning him. To which the mayor Caldamene arrives, not understanding really what happened either. He rebukes Geralt for the massacre, and he urges Geralt to leave Blaviken and never to return. And thus, Geralt of Rivia earns himself the moniker of being the Butcher of Blaviken. Before I end this segment out, I just want to also point out that Syanna from the Blood and Wine DLC, she is also born under the Black Sun, and that is why her family ostracizes her there as well. And so we never really get an answer to if the Curse of the Black Sun is a real thing or not. We never really know who was in the right, if it was Stregobor or Renfrew, which of them was the lesser evil. And we also get that second part of sometimes you cannot choose to stay out of a conflict, because sometimes there is a lesser evil and a greater evil, but sometimes there is an even worse evil that forces you to choose that slightly lesser one. And that is a lesson that our dearest Geralt has yet to learn even after this. However, no one can really debate the events that transpired in Blaviken haven't affected our White Wolf. And once again, we are back with the framing narrative. However, this interlude is really quite interesting because it is essentially just a really long Geralt monologue of him talking to Iola because he finds her in the garden. And as we remember, she is under a vow of silence. So in this very metatextual way, here she stands in for us, the audience, with Geralt basically just info dumping his life story onto her and through her onto us. This is where we learn that he carries 2 swords, 1 silver for monsters, 1 steel for humans, though he does actually say that that's not exactly true because some monsters can be killed with a steel sword and that a silver sword will kill a human as well. He talks about how he became a witcher, undergoing the trial of the grasses in Kaer Morhen, the Witcher keep from the School of the Wolf. He talks about how he was trained by an older witcher called Vesemir, and he says that even though he was taken as a child and he doesn't remember his parents, that's okay because he still had a father, which to me is one of the cutest moments in this entire book. He also gives us the information that the reason why he has bleached hair is because he went through the trial of the grasses quite well, and so the Witchers decided to experiment on him a bit more than they would on other Witchers. And he also says that when he first went on the trail, as the Witchers call it, he was excited to fight his first monster, but he was really quickly disavowed from that noble notion. Because the first monster that Geralt ever met was actually a man who was threatening to abuse sexually a 13-year-old girl while her father watched. He says that when he stepped in to fight off the men, the girl just was terrified of the carnage and was terrified of him as well, instead of thanking him, and that the father actually ran off with the men as well, leaving his daughter. Ever since then, Geralt has decided to not get involved in the matters of humans, and that now he travels from town to town collecting Witcher contracts and fulfilling them. He says how the Witchers hide behind the Witcher Codex, where the Witcher Codex by itself is actually not a real thing. It's more so an excuse for every single Witcher to use their own moral compass in dealing with these different situations in ways every Witcher would prefer. And by the way, as he's telling all of this to Iola, it is really meta because he keeps asking her if she's not bored. And in a way, that's Sapkowski asking us, the audience, if we're not bored of the info dump, but I digress. At the end of this interlude, Geralt reflects on this codex he has of non-intervention and the couple of times that it failed him. Like I just told you about, the massacre in Blaviken was one example, but he also references another time, and it relates to a certain thing that happened in Sintra. He says that he thinks that the child is probably alive by now. So we're alluding to a certain baby in Sintra, who coincidentally was born around the time of Beltane, the time when Yennefer was born. In the end, Geralt thanks Iola for listening and us for bearing this very extensive monologue of infodumps, and we journey into the next short story, which is about that incident where his codex of non-intervention failed him in Sintra. This tale is titled A Question of Price. However, in Polish, kwestia ceny actually can be translated as well to a matter of price. Kwestia, the word, can mean both things. I figured that since this tale takes place in a court, a queen's court, I also wanted to wear a crown. This time I'm wearing a flower crown. It's called a wianek in Polish. So let me know if you like the wianek or not. I'm kind of 50-50 because in my viewfinder here, I really can't tell if it looks good or if it looks kind of weird. So let me know what you think of the wianek in the comments. Anyway, this unassuming short story, which is very high in political intrigue, I would argue that macroscopically, it ends up being probably the most important when it comes to the story of the Witcher universe in general, but about that later on. We start off with perhaps the most important scene ever. What scene might that be? Well, it is the first scene where our boy Geralt finally gets bathed. And he gets ready for the banquet in Sintra by Haxo. For context, he was invited to Sintra by Queen Calanthe to celebrate her daughter Pavetta's 15th birthday. But also, different parties from different nations are invited because obviously she is coming of age, at least for the time. And since Calanthe's husband Ragnar died, and mind you, Queen Calanthe's an amazing queen. She's the Lioness of Sintra and she's very, very well respected. But she is a woman and the men might not view her as good of a queen if she doesn't have a husband. And so to kind of prevent that and to be taken seriously, she feels like she needs to marry off Pavetta so that there is a king, even if it's just a figurehead. Anyway, the two most important countries that she invites to Sintra, this is the crest of Sintra by the way, are Skellige over here. With the delegation arrives Mousak, Iced, and Krachankreet that many people will recognize from The Witcher 3. I used his image from The Witcher 3, however, keep in mind at this point he's way younger. And Atra with Rainfire and Windham. Two main suitors for Pavetta are Krach and Windham. Now, before joining the banquet, Geralt is informed that he will be known as Ravix of Forhorn. And if that name sounds familiar to you, well, if you think to the tourney in Blood and Wine, you'll remember that Geralt has the option of going as Ravix of Forhorn, and this is a reference to the alias that Calanthe gives him in this short story. Geralt is quite smart, as we know by now, and he is very suspicious as to why a queen of all people needs a witcher, especially for a banquet for her daughter. After all, witchers defeat monsters, not humans, and they're not very political creatures. So he asks Haxo why Calanthe brought him to the court, suspecting that there might be some supernatural issue that he just wasn't informed about yet. To this, Haxo vaguely mentions an apparition that has been stalking the castle. He describes it as small, spiky, and haunting. Geralt, of course, doubts this tale, but he is warned that he should follow royal orders because, after all, he is now part of the Queen's court. When Geralt arrives to the banquet, he sits beside of Queen Calanthe, but despite this, Queen Calanthe doesn't really talk to him at the start, instead focusing on the other delegations. Also, something that is very important is the people at the party are described as being very colorfully dressed, which, once again, something that really annoyed me about the costuming of The Witcher was that everyone just looked so great. Like, everything looked so gray and dreary, and look, like, I get it. That is really called for. For example, I think the Grain of Truth short story should really, you know, have that atmosphere of doom and gloom and mist and the scary manor and whatever. But scenes like this, like, I don't want to see silver and bronze and whatever. I want to see color, especially with Queen Calanthe. You know, green is very important for this family. They have all green eyes and ashen white hair. More color, please. The first delegation that we are introduced to is the Skellige delegation, led by Eist Tjorsach, who is the brother to King Bran, who dies at the start of The Witcher 3. He has brought with him Krachankreet, as I said already before, as a suitor for Princess Pavetta, and brings with him Mousak, who is a druid. Now, you might recognize this image of Mousak and say, Vera, that's Ermion that we meet in Skellige. And yes, indeed, that is Ermion. I hate to be that person that finds issue with everything, and especially the video games, which I really, really, really love. There's no reason that his name should have been translated as Ermion. I'm sorry, but his name in Polish is Myszowór. I don't know, it sounds like mouse, right? Because Myszka is mouse and Myszowór. Anyway, Mousak is the better translation of the name, so I really have to give this to the translators and to Netflix, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't know why Ermion was the choice that they went with, but for the case of this video, I'm going to be calling him Mousak. Just know that this is the same as Ermion. It's the same character. And he is there because he is actually the advisor to the king. As Queen Calanthe meets this delegation, Eist is a little bit of a flirt, I have to say. He subtly compliments Queen Calanthe's beauty and suggests that the princess will grow into a similar one. And Queen Calanthe is very flustered by this. As the feast continues, Krachankreet, we all know this guy. He's very boisterous, very loud, crazy, and, you know, really bring the Skellige spirit to this lovely little banquet in Sintra. There's also a random entertainer called Kutkudak who constantly makes, like, chicken noises. Fun fact. Rainfire and Atra is here as well. You can actually find Rainfire in the tourney as well, though in a somewhat degenerated state, but I'll let you find that one out by yourself. As the partying commences, Queen Calanthe decides that now is the time to initiate a conversation with Geralt. because the others are substantially distracted. Queen Calanthe says that she wants to hire Geralt, to which Geralt quickly replies that he is not an assassin, he does not meddle in the affairs of humans, and that perhaps she has the wrong guy for the job. He implies that she wants him to get rid of a political rival, for example, because it is well known that Calanthe really prefers to have a good association with Skellige. Calanthe is quite taken aback by Geralt's perceptiveness, and she says that she believes that everyone has a price that they can buy loyalty for. Kings, continued Calanthe, divide people into two categories, those they order around and those they buy, because they adhere to the old and banal truth that everyone can be bought. Everyone. It's only a question of price. Don't you agree? Geralt, of course, maintains his subtle defiance and respectful composure and shares an anecdote that might sound familiar to us of when he was hired by a prince to find a princess just based off of her shoe size. And he said that he wouldn't do it because that's not a witcher's work. So he said that for him, not everything is a question of price. As the partying continues, Crach and Windhelm are kind of antagonistic to each other, and this starts causing a little bit of a commotion. Watching all of this unfold, Calanthe seems to imply to Geralt that a potential match between Skellige and Sintra could be in danger. However, she doesn't elaborate on this yet. And while all this is happening, the druid Malsac, who for now has just been keeping to himself, starts doing some magic and starts arranging runes that only Geralt can read from across the room. Geralt nods to him. At this point, the woman of the hour enters, Pavetta, but instead of being happy, she's kind of depressed, I can't lie. Very beautiful as well. Iced wasn't wrong that the apple doesn't far from the tree. Calanthe, in all honesty, isn't a huge fan of Crach and his boisterous tendencies. However, that is a sacrifice she is willing to make for a chance to align herself with Skellige. And so Geralt asks her, if she's the queen, what could be strong enough to stop her willpower? And she mysteriously replies, destiny. At this point, everything goes wrong because a certain knight, who is obviously helmed, enters and introduces himself as the Urcheon of Erlenwold. In Polish, it's Jesh, and Jesh just simply means hedgehog, but I guess hedgehog would translate funny, and so they went with Urcheon. Because he is helmed, Calanthe insists that he takes it off, but Urcheon says that he won't take it off until midnight. Kind of like a reverse Cinderella. And now, it really goes crazy when Urcheon over here reveals that King Ragnar, remember Calanthe's old husband, made him a promise 15 years ago, and he promised Pavetta's hand in marriage to this man over here. And as you can imagine, this does not go over well. Calanthe obviously threatens him, and as this is all going down, Geralt and Malsac keep throwing each other nonverbal communication. Basically, what happened was Urcheon saved King Ragnar's life after he fell from his horse and into a ravine. After saving his life, Urcheon claimed the law of surprise as compensation. This is what he says. Let us not pretend we've never heard of such requests, of the law of surprise as old as humanity itself, of the price a man who saves another can demand, of the granting of a seemingly impossible wish. You will give me the first thing that comes to greet you. It may be a dog, you'll say, or a halberdier at the gate, even a mother-in-law, impatient to admonish the man upon his return home. Or you'll give me what you find at home, yet don't expect. After a long journey, honorable gentleman, and an unexpected return, this could be a lover in the wife's bed, but sometimes it's a child marked out by destiny. And in fact, the chicken sound-making jester tells the story of a certain gnome called Rumpelstilts. I wonder if that sounds familiar, who came to a certain princess and invoked the law of surprise, and when she didn't give him her child, she and the child mysteriously died soon after of the plague. After hearing all of this, Calanthe does admit that Ragnar did make this promise, but at the same time she also criticized his poor judgment and said that she has to refer to the council of if they will honor this. Geralt, though, once again proves his perceptiveness and realizes that the reason that Urcheon didn't claim the law of surprise 15 years ago when Pavetta was a baby was because Ragnar made sure that Pavetta would have to consent to being taken by Urcheon. And now that she is of age, she can actually give or not give the consent, which is why Urcheon arrived now and not earlier. We also get a little bit of world building, finding out that witchers actually use the law of surprise to make more witchers, because that's how they get babies to undergo the trial of the grasses. It is also at this point that Malsac reveals to everyone that Geralt is a witcher in the conversation. And just as that happens, the bells ring out, signifying midnight, and so Calanthe tells Urchan to please remove his helmet. And when he removes his helmet, what do we find? A hedgehog. And after that happens, Pavetta does something crazy. She confirms to the court that she wants to be taken by the Urchan. Feeling triumphant and thinking that he finally has his girl, or rather his child of surprise, the Urchan tells Queen Calanthe to please place Pavetta's hand into his, but Calanthe thinks that is disgusting. And more than that, our boy Krach over here gets offended on Queen Calanthe's behalf. So is Rainfarn, and they attack the Urchan. This pisses off Pavetta, and she basically goes super cyan. Chaos, she's floating around in the room in a green bubble of light. Everything's flying everywhere. The Urchan is still fighting for his life. This is also the point where Geralt and Malsac team up to try and put a rest to all of this by trying to pacify Pavetta using magic and Ard. And Malsac is also wondering how it's possible for Pavetta to go Super Saiyan and cause all this destruction if she's a virgin, because only non-virgins are able to practice magic. Which, foreshadowing. Anyway, our dream team over here of Malsac and Geralt do manage to break through to Pavetta and neutralize her. She falls down to the floor, she's crying, but at least she's no longer hovering in a magical ball and destroying everything around her. And amidst this confusion, the bell strikes one more time, indicating that the previous bell was a fake one and that midnight is actually now. And as midnight strikes, guess what happens? He is turned into a man. Oh yeah, and by the way, I forgot to mention this before, but as Pavetta was going Super Saiyan, she was basically screaming his name, and his name was Duny. We find out that he is Duny of Mecht. It turns out that this entire plot to expose Duny as a hedgehog-like creature was concocted by Calanthe, because Calanthe knew the true identity of this phantom. And so she had the bells ring earlier than midnight. Anyways, because things kind of went out of hand, she dismisses everyone and just has all the most important people stay. So that would be Geralt, Duny, Pavetta, Iced, and Malsac. And thus Duny starts his explanation. His explanation is that he is a prince of Mecht. He was transformed into a monster at birth, and he was told that only a child of surprise would be able to undo this magic spell that was set upon him. He was so ugly and such a magical abomination that his father told him that he has to leave the kingdom to not bring shame to the dynasty. And so he left, traveling as a squire for a night. During these travels, that's when this thing with King Ragnar happened. And after a few years, he came to Sintra to meet his child of surprise. And he found Princess Pavetta, with whom he fell in love. Tired kind of all of this, Queen Calanthe basically relents, and she's like, fine, whatever, you can marry Pavetta. And then she turns to Iced and she says that she won't give up the throne yet. Turns out, Iced has proposed to Calanthe, and Calanthe said that she'll accept because she has seen now that she should listen to her heart, because she never had the opportunity to do so before, and so she shall now. Something that absolutely gags me is that Malsac says, oh, the youth these days, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And they also agree that since Malsac is a druid, and to ensure that Pavetta's magical development goes as planned, he will be her protector in that sense. Also, when Calanthe finally gives Pavetta over to Duny officially and says that he can have her, that is actually what lifts the curse permanently as the sun begins to rise. Because of this entire ordeal, Duny says that he wants to thank Geralt. Because if not for Geralt stepping in and kind of backing up the idea of the law of surprise, perhaps the evening would have turned out very differently, not to mention Pavetta going Super Saiyan. Specifically, what Duny says is, I took you for a blind, bloodthirsty tool, for someone who kills coldly and without question, who wipes his blade clean of blood and counts the cash. But I've become convinced that the Witcher's profession is worthy of respect. You protect us not only from the evil lurking in the darkness, but also from that which lies within ourselves. It is a shame there are so few of you. And that gets Geralt thinking, well, if Duny is insisting on making sure Geralt gets paid other than the green sash with jewels that Calanthe gave him, so be it. And since he just said, shame that there's so few Witchers, Geralt is like, you're right, there are very few rules. And so, quite poetically, he invokes the law of surprise, saying that he requests something of Duny that he already has, but that he doesn't know about. Mind you, Geralt already figured out that Princess Pavetta is pregnant. After all, he is a witcher, he can hear heartbeats, and somehow Pavetta was able to use magic. Of course, that doesn't make anyone else very happy, and Queen Calanthe is shocked because she didn't even know that Princess Pavetta was pregnant. And that concludes the story of what happened in the banquet at Sintra. Geralt got roped into a pretty crazy story. This one is truly where the main story of The Witcher starts, in my opinion. Everything else up to this point was introducing Geralt and Witchers. This story introduces the main conflict because it will be surrounding the baby. About that in Sword of Destiny. But as we leave this banquet, I just want to say, even though this already looks kind of crazy, not every secret has been revealed yet. And don't spoil others in the comment section just in case they don't know what the final twist is. Let's journey now from Sintra back to Elander. Back in the Temple of Melitele, Geralt is reading. However, his reverie is interrupted by Nenneke, who barges in and says that his bestie the bard, Dandelion, is going to be visiting. Nenneke is actually not a fan of Dandelion. She says, "It's Dandelion this time, your fellow, that idler, parasite, and good for nothing, that priest of art, the bright shining star of the ballad and love poem. As usual, he's radiant with fame, puffed up like a pig's bladder, and stinking of beer. Do you want to see him? Of course. He's my friend after all." Nenneke, peeved, shrugged her shoulders. "I can't understand that friendship. He's your absolute opposite." To which Geralt responds, "Opposites attract." Now, what is important here, and is something that Netflix Witcher didn't understand, is that Geralt and Dandelion are really good friends. They care for each other. It's not a one-way street. Geralt loves Dandelion. He cares for him so much. And of course, Dandelion cares about Geralt because, I mean, hey, he's visiting him in the Temple of Melitele after Geralt had half his neck ripped out. Because remember, he's still healing from that Striga battle. When Dandelion enters, Mother Nenneke continues with her absolutely savage one-liners, saying that Dandelion shouldn't call her mother because the very idea that he could be her son fills her with horror. When Geralt asks Dandelion what he's doing here, Dandelion says that he came as soon as he heard about Geralt being mauled by a Striga. And Geralt says that he'll be leaving soon, probably for the south, because there's no work in Elander, because the world is changing. There's less and less monsters. And Dandelion immediately starts mocking Geralt for being so melancholic and philosophizing all the time. Because yes, a huge part of Geralt's personality in the books is that he is a massive wannabe philosopher. And as Geralt starts to ramble, Dandelion says, Yes, the world is changing, the sun sets and the vodka is coming to an end. What else in your opinion is coming to an end? You meant something about endings, philosopher." So yeah, like even Dandelion playfully calls Geralt a philosopher because Geralt is such a yapper. I swear to God, if he was living in the modern world, he would have a YouTube channel where he just yaps about whatever is wrong with the world any given week. The rest of the interlude is Dandelion and Geralt discussing how the attitudes toward creatures start changing. The most important example that I think they give is the idea of the unicorn hunters, because the way that this profession died out was essentially unicorns would come to virgins, and so the hunting parties would use the virgins as bait for the unicorn. But now that the unicorns have pretty much died out, or at least they assume so, foreshadowing for future books, there is no more need for these unicorn hunting parties and the unicorn hunting virgins. The interlude ends reminiscing playfully on their first expedition. Dandelion says, "That reminds me of our first expedition together to the edge of the world," he said. "Do you remember? We met at the fete in Goulet, and you persuaded me. You had to flee from Goulet as fast as your horse could carry you because the girl you knocked up under a musician's podium had 4 sturdy brothers. They were looking for you all over town, threatening to gouge you and cover you in pitch and sawdust. That's why you attached yourself to me then. And you almost jumped out of your pants with joy to have a companion. Until then, you only had your horse for company." And that takes us to the next short story. I really quickly want to touch on Dandelion's name because in the TV show, his name is Jaskier. In fact, in the original Polish, that is his name. Jaskier translates to buttercup, which is obviously a different flower than a dandelion, but I believe dandelion is the correct choice for a name for dandelion because dandelion is his stage name. It's not his actual name. Jaskier in Polish, even though it does mean flower, it is quite similar to the adjective jaskrawy, which means someone is very colorful, bright, a bright, colorful personality, if you will. And that's very fitting for our beloved bard. And so, similarly to Jaskier is similar to jaskrawy, in English, dandy is very similar to dandelion. Once again, that's a very good description or a very good image to have when thinking of dandelion. I think it's really stupid that in the Netflix show, they went with Jaskier as an effort to stay faithful to the Polish source material because it detracts from the point of dandelion having a stage name that signifies something about him. Anyway, let's talk about the edge of the world, shall we? The edge of the world begins with our boys, Geralt and Dandelion, traveling to Upper and Lower Posada. Okay, now this one I'm not sure, but I know that posiadłość is like it's like a house that you own, basically. And whenever I kind of thought of Upper and Lower Posada, I just kind of thought that it was a funny name for like village, because I always think of the word posiadłość. And it also makes me think of posiedzieć, posada. Anyway, it could be also a reference to apple trees, like sad, but anyway, not too sure. Probably should have searched that up. Sorry for the quality content, guys. Our beloved boys are currently in Upper Posada looking for work because, repeat it all together with me, Geralt is always broke. And they did just flee Gulet. Anyway, they're sitting around in Upper Posada and they're discussing the different types of contracts that are available in the region. The main thing that we hear about are the elves that are by the mountains, because everyone who ventures towards the mountains never comes back. However, the townsfolk also tell many different stories about many different creatures, including bats, which Geralt, he is not a bat exterminator. Mouse exterminator, yes, though.
Look for evidence of rat activity.
Thing is, I know what evidence of manticore activity looks like, but rodents?
Geralt, we'd both rather be somewhere else.
Don't really feel up to looking for rat shit.
Stop whining.
But after they have a little chat, Geralt thanks the villagers and leaves, which shocks Dandelion because Dandelion's like, Geralt, you are broke. You need money. We need money. They said that there were so many monsters. Why didn't you take any of the contracts? To which Geralt replies, people like to invent monsters and monstrosities. Then they seem less monstrous to themselves. When they get blind drunk, cheat, steal, beat their wives, starve an old woman, when they kill a trapped fox with an axe, or riddle the last existing unicorn with arrows, they like to think that the bane entering cottages at daybreak is more monstrous than they are. Their hearts feel lighter then. They find it easier to leave. Anyway, after Geralt says this, Dandelion says, Geralt, I think someone is riding a horse behind us. To which Geralt says, no way. I thought the folk around here only rode bats. Referencing the person who wanted him to kill bats. I promise it's funny in context. Turns out that the person who's following them is a villager called Netley. And remember how I said there were two villages? Netley is actually from the lower village. He tells Geralt that he is in need of a monster hunter and that he has a genuine contract. This piques Geralt's interest, and they follow Netley back to Lower Posada. As they travel there, Dandelion can't help but notice all the fertile land and how much crops these people have. Like, it's truly amazing. Not to mention the gorgeous scenery. Turns out that this area in which they live is called the Valley of the Flowers, traditionally Dolblatana, but it is also known as the Edge of the World. Geralt prods Netley about the elven situation, but Netley says that both parties basically just stick to themselves. And Dandelion says that it's probably for the best. Later, as Geralt and Dandelion end up finishing their meal at an inn, he thanks his hosts and they start to discuss the local issue. The main guy explaining the contract to him is called Dune, who is like the village elder. Or at least he's older than Netley anyway. Essentially, he says that there's a devil in the field and that this devil keeps stealing their cabbage, playing loads of tricks on the locals, and that honestly, it's awful and they have to stop this. Dune is adamant that Geralt does not kill the devil because the devil is also quite helpful in killing pests that would infect the field otherwise. And says that the bad things that the devil does are just pranks. And thus, the contract would involve Geralt catching the devil, but not killing him. To be honest, this really piques Geralt's interest because it is kind of an abnormal contract because he's not supposed to kill the monster, and not to mention, devils don't exist. So he's very intrigued to see a monster that doesn't exist. And so we cut to Geralt and Dandelion in the fields, trying to find this devil. As they walk, Geralt and Dandelion actually have quite a funny exchange where they make devil jokes, kind of how Yen and Geralt make wolf jokes in The Witcher 3. And actually, I'm curious if these jokes inspired the wolf jokes.
To transform into a werewolf. It's a dog's life, huh?
But basically, it doesn't translate as well, but in Polish we have a lot of sayings that have to do with the devil, like "Ach, do diabła z tym," or stuff like that, which that one translates to the devil with it, or "do diabli," which means to the devils and stuff like that. You know, it's just these frustration sayings, basically, that we say. And they kind of do a little riff on them as they're looking for the devil. And as they walk through the fields, they find a little clearing where they find offerings to the creature, which really surprises them because why would these villagers try to summon the creature with candles and seeds and stuff like that? Especially since these efforts appear to want to appease the devil, which really confuses Geralt even more. Suddenly, a bizarre creature resembling a goatman appears and calls them zasrani smarkacze, warning them to leave and bleating at them, calling them żartownicze zasrani, which is very funny because it means pranksters who shat themselves. But even more puzzlingly, after he does this, he just starts throwing metal balls at them, which Geralt and Dandelion, they're like, what in the world is happening? And funnily enough, the devil's really accurate aim forces Geralt the Witcher to retreat. With the Dandelion, of course, running right after Geralt and cursing all the way. Anyway, Geralt and Dandelion decide to regroup. They talk once again with Dune and Netley, but this time, Dune and Netley bring another woman called Lila, and an older woman who is supposed to be like a wise woman, and they have this magical book. And thus, Geralt begins his questioning. He suspects that they have already tried to get rid of the devil and haven't really succeeded. He also questions them about what he found in the clearing, to which Dune explains that they have a magical family book that only the old woman can recite because no one is able to read the runes. Only Lila, who is being taught by the old lady, are able to recall them from memory. And so Geralt, being very skeptical of this, decides to test this and has the old lady read out from the book. This entire time, Lila is staring at him in a very cold fashion. She's very frail and very scary, scary gaze. And as he tests the memory, they find out that the devil is actually a Sylvan, and that they gave him metal balls because the book says that if you give a Sylvan metal balls, then the Sylvan will mistake them for nuts, try to eat them, and die. However, the Sylvan is obviously smarter than that because he used those metal balls as ammunition against our boys Geralt and Dandelion. Anyway, because of all of this, Geralt just ends up pressing the villagers of why they just won't kill the devil if it's so annoying. But after this comment, Dune tells Lila and the old woman to leave for some reason. And this is where these two come clean. They say that actually the old woman is not the one reading the book, it is Lila, but Lila is a mute and she can only speak through the old lady. And the people of Lower Posada see her almost as a wise woman or a prophetess. These women like Lila secretly lead the village and give insights that help maintain the peace and the harvest. It was actually Lila who allowed Netley to seek out Geralt's help because she approved of him based on what she saw in the Upper Posada and on the way down from it. But Lila is very particular and she always does things very by the book. And mind you, the book also has some things about the rates that witchers usually take. And Geralt says, fine, he will take on this contract. However, he is expected to pay more than what the book says. And actually, this ties well into the negotiation tactics that you can use in The Witcher 3. Back in the field, Geralt and Dandelion are ready for round 2 of their battle with the devil. Geralt calls out to the devil seeking a conversation, but the devil insists that A, he is not a devil, and B, it challenges him to a contest. First, the proposition is that they do a shouting contest, but Geralt says that's stupid, and so that changes into a running contest, which also is not accepted, and so ultimately they decide on doing a riddle contest. Now, Q&A for you, the watcher, to see if you are paying attention, if you could pass the Sylvan's riddle. The riddle is, little pink leaves, pod small and full. It grows in soft clay not far from the stream. On a long stalk its flower is moist, but to a cat please show it not, 'cause if you do, he'll eat the lot. What is this? The answer is cabbage. If you did it, good job. You would have done better than Geralt of Rivia. Because Big G Geralt loses and demands a rematch because he needs to give his riddle as well, but the Sylvan really isn't listening. And thus a brawl ensues, because obviously that's the only way they can solve problems. After a little bit of an intense fight filled with more metal balls flying everywhere, the Sylvan manages to escape, with Geralt managing to give chase. However, as that happens, Geralt is knocked down by a horse. He thinks that it's Dandelion coming to help him, but in fact, he just hits his head, loses consciousness. And when he wakes up disorientated, he is lying on his stomach and he is bound, and he hears not familiar voices nearby. He overhears a conversation between the devil, who we find out his name is Torque, and an elf called Galar. This conversation reveals that Torque is stealing the food from Upper and Lower Posada to give food to the elves who are starving in the mountains, because unlike the land over here, they are really in dire straits. Geralt also notices that these guys are talking in the Elder speech, making him realize that these are Enshade, a pure-blooded elven group. Soon, he also realizes that our boy Dandelion is also captured. Tensions start to rise when Galar and a female elf, Toruviel, come and insist that they check on Geralt and on Dandelion's bindings to see if they are strong enough. Mind you, these guys are super antagonistic towards them, and so we kind of know that they just want to be bad to them. In fact, Toruviel ends up kicking Geralt, while Torque actually protests and says that she shouldn't be doing that to Geralt. Of course, Dandelion has to get involved as well and is shouting at her to stop shouting and kicking and mocking Geralt, to which Toruviel responds by breaking Dandelion's beloved lute. Which, to be honest, that's like Dandelion's most prized possession, so he kind of goes ballistic. But not more so than Geralt, who, may I remind you, he is actually Dandelion's friend in the books, and therefore he full-on attacks Toruviel, not caring that he's still bound. Arguments, chaos, fighting, punching, etc., etc. Torque over here is just trying to get everyone to calm down because he wasn't asking for this. But all that stops, or at least comes down, when a white-haired elf arrives, and his name's Filavandrel. By now, it's become quite obvious that Geralt and Dandelion have found themselves in a little bit of a tight spot in a complex conflict between the elves of the mountain and the humans of Dol Blathanna, because the elves are really, really suffering. They're not able to farm, especially through the winters, which are super tough, while the humans over here are living in paradise, a paradise that the elves used to inhabit. And thus, the elves are kind of trying to seek a revenge against humanity. And Geralt and Dandelion have found themselves in the crossfires. Filavandrel explains this to Geralt and paints humans as very hateful creatures, hating the smallest differences, even like the shape of someone's ear, and how through this hatred, they were the ones that forced the elves into these uninhabitable lands. He explains this as the elves never had to cultivate the land. The land just grew for them, you know, they lived in harmony with the land, but then the humans came and the humans coerced the land to work for them. And now with the humans' dominance, the land itself is dying and the elves who were here first are starving. He says, "It is you humans who hate anything that differs from you, be it only by the shape of its ears. That's why you took our land from us, drove us from our homes, forced us into savage mountains. You took our Dol Blathanna, the Valley of Flowers. I am Filavandrel and Fidhal of Silver Towers and of the Feliorn family from White Ships, now exiled and hounded to the edge of the world. I am Filavandrel of the edge of the world." Geralt tells him that, well, survival requires cooperation, so what if he just worked with the humans? You know, in trade. But Filavandrel is very dismissive of this. He rejects this and says that elves will not be slaves to human economy. And specifically when Geralt suggests to Filavandrel that what if they just traded grain. Philavandrine said, with humans, never. So we're really seeing that even though Filavandrel has a point, Filavandrel himself is perpetuating his own problem as well and being incredibly racist towards the humans as well. It goes both ways. Geralt does talk about human arrogance, but he also acknowledges that times are changing. We're living in the human age now, and you have to accept that. Filavandrel obviously rejects this and compares humans to evil parasites and that this era is not natural, and therefore he will not accept it. Geralt tries to explain to him that if they do not cooperate, then elves are as good as dead. Anyway, in this arrogant isolation. This kind of pisses Filavandrel off, and at this point, he just says that he has to kill Geralt and Dandelion anyway, so that their plot for stealing human resources to make them survive through the winter isn't revealed. As this happens, Geralt pleads with Filavandrel to just kill him because he is the monster hunter and to please spare his friend Dandelion. Again, he begs for Dandelion's life to be spared because they are really good friends and they genuinely care for each other. We see in this short story how Dandelion stands up to Toruviel, an elf, with him being a bard with like no combat skills, standing up to defend his friend. And now Geralt, knowing that he's going to be sacrificed, is standing up to the king of the elves to have Dandelion spared. I mean, these guys really, really care for each other. And I'm just so upset that this doesn't come across in the Witcher TV show, where Geralt is mostly annoyed by Dandelion. And once again, I blame this on the translation because, like I said earlier, there's a lot of sarcasm that's lost, and the jokes that fly between Geralt and Dandelion are very sarcastic. And when the humorous aspect of these jokes is lost, what we are left with is unfortunately just rudeness. And this beautiful, very funny, comedic buddy cop kind of duo that they have is totally, totally lost. And I think it's what makes their friendship so special. However, a very sudden shift occurs where, once again, a new person enters the clearing. And who else is it but Lila, the weird, quiet girl who spoke through the old lady. And suddenly, the elves kneel to her. Filavandrel is like, "Oh my god, my lady, you have returned to us. Take care of us, please." It's honestly quite crazy and very dramatic. Wordlessly, Lila ends up commanding the elves to return back to the mountains. And before they go, Filavandrel begs her to show the elves love again, but she declines. Because of Lila, Toruviel feels bad and decides to show respect to Dandelion by giving him her lute. I think secretly she's also impressed by Dandelion standing up to the elves for his friend Geralt as well, despite being only a bard. And after the showing, Filavandrel also bids farewell to Geralt, acknowledging that he was right about feeling pity for the elves, but assures Geralt that if their fate is sealed, then they will die fighting for their race, and that he hopes to see Geralt in the battlefield for the elven lives. It just matters whether it is fighting for the elves or against them, and Geralt says that he'll try to be there. The story ends with Torque, Geralt, and Dandelion sitting around and joking. Dandelion is trying out his new lute, and he is really impressed by it, and to be honest, he jokes that going through all that pain was worth it because this lute is better than his old one anyway, as well as teasing Torque for his past mischief. Torque insists that all he ever did was just pranks. It was all meant to be funny. Dandelion adds that Geralt, in the meantime, ended up reading up about Lyfia, a goddess of the fertility of the land. Lyfia is a goddess that brings life to the land, and all people honor her. She resides with the people that rise above the rest, but other tales claim that she loves all living things equally, which would explain also why Dune and Netley were so adamant that Geralt and Dandelion don't kill Torque, because Lila loves all of them equally, at least according to that interpretation of that fairy tale. And they don't want to risk losing her because she is the one that's bringing fertility to Dol Blathanna. And Geralt suggests that he's not sure yet, but maybe if humans prove to be worthy, perhaps she'll stay with them. This short story ends with Dandelion saying that he feels motivated to write a ballad. They think over what the name could be, and they come up with the name called The Edge of the World. Kraniec Świata. Of course, this was modified in the TV show to create the banger Toss a coin to your witcher. Oh, Valley of Plenty. And I'm not mad about it because, oh my god, that song was everywhere and it is one of my favorite parts of the TV show, and there aren't that many, so I'm very, very grateful that we at least got this song. The story ends with Dobranoc, powiedział diabeł, which translates to good night, said the devil. And the devil saying goodnight is kind of like a Polish saying as well, actually, so that's a reference to that. Now, you might have realized that I didn't give a fairy tale that this story retells, and that is because this one is really hard for me to pin down. Because there's no obvious fairy tale that is jumping at me, and there's no obvious fairy tale that is obviously used for inspiration. However, my hypothesis is that this is a very, very loose retelling of A Midsummer Night's Dream, with Torque being a very obvious Puck figure. Puck is the sprite that kind of causes and orchestrates a lot of the mischief that happens in William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. And here Torque always says that, oh, he's just playing jokes, he's just playing harmless jokes. There's also the idea of crossing over from the human world into the magical forest world, which is what happens with Geralt and Dandelion as they cross over from the human world into the elven world. However, here it is a little bit flipped because the elves aren't in the, aren't in the fertile forest exactly. They are more so in the desolate mountains. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure about this one. So if you have any ideas which fairy tale this could be retelling or which story this could be retelling, please do let me know in the comments because this one really puzzles me. To be honest, this is also my least favorite short story of the bunch, but I can't deny that it plays a vital role. I really think that Sapkowski thought so well and hard about the order in which he's presenting the short stories, because this short story's purpose is to look at society on the common people level, right? In the previous short story, we had the politics, and here we have the everyday life of the people. We learn about the racism in the series and how pretty much all the different groups of people equally hate each other. And it's not just one side that is racist towards the other. All sides are pretty much equally awful to one another. In this short story, I'd say the elves are definitely more oppressed